Hey guys, such an interesting video on Wild Rifts. They're back with the patch 3.2 tier list. And honestly, I was kind of thinking that I wasn't gonna really do this because the changes are minimal, but I decided to do the tier list anyway. Firstly, to discuss the very few changes that we have. I also had a few changes of opinion, so that also led to a little bit more changes. And also, I can just pretty much use 3.2 to kind of highlight certain picks that I think should be highlighted that sometimes I gloss over because I normally only really go through the changes so that the video isn't like over an hour long, because there are some tier lists, I think two previous tier lists that I made, that I talked for so long that about every single pick in every single role that the video was over an hour, and I don't really want to do that because I think an hour video is a little bit too long for a tier list or for any video in general, and not many people have that much time to watch the videos. So anyways, we're gonna jump straight into the Baron lane. I'm gonna be highlighting certain picks. So first up is Renekton. Now, why do I still put Renekton in the top of the Baron lane tier list? Now, recently, of course, he did get a buff, but that buff was because he was weak. I had him in the S plus tier all along, and I still have him in the S plus tier. Now, Camille obviously got kicked out of her perch, so as a result, I now think Renekton is probably the best Baron laner. Now, the main reason why I think that is the case is basically if you take a look at like the S plus and the S tier, he doesn't have too many like horrible matchups, especially now that Fiora and Camille have both gotten significant nerfs. Those matchups become a bit easier for him. Those were the matchups that used to be very difficult for him. The rest of the matchups are all pretty okay. Jace can be a bit of a challenge with his range, but by and large, his matchups are alright. His early game is strong, and I think he's just a really good Baron lane champion in general. Now, Irelia, I moved up to the S plus tier, mostly because I felt the S plus tier was a little bit barren with just Renekton and Sett there, but I really do think Irelia is S plus. Now, as I mentioned in all the previous tier lists, her matchups in the Baron lane aren't very good, and she doesn't really have a lot of kill pressure 1v1 unless her opponent makes a couple of mistakes or whatnot. But the reason why I think that she can be really good is she is very strong as a champion in general, and even if you can't get kills in the Baron lane, you can roam to mid lane, get kills, or what I think is a lot more likely is get kills from the dragon and the herald fight that happens really early on into the game and snowball from there. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is the Baron lane matchup doesn't matter too much for Irelia as long as you roam and go for those dragon and herald team fights, and you can snowball off of that. And with that snowball, you can maybe get a solo kill in the lane itself. So basically, Irelia is only S plus because of how OP she as a champion is. And her only nerf was for jungle Irelia. So Irelia as a champion in non-jungle roles is still the same. So now the next champion I wanted to highlight is, of course, Camille. So Camille obviously got the nerf on her Q, where it does now like 40, 60, 80, 100, or is it something like that, true damage instead of doing 100% true damage all the while. So now, first up, gotta clear up a little bit of a misconception that some people have. It's not that they're cutting her damage from 100% to 40%, but now it's just that instead of doing 100% true damage, you're doing 40% true damage and 60% physical damage at level 1. So what basically means is that you will still do not same amount of damage, but you will still do it's not like you're doing only 40% of the damage you were doing, just that 60% of your damage now takes into account the enemy's resistances, which of course at level 1 they don't build armor. Like, no one starts with a cloth armor, I don't think. So what that basically means is that it takes into account the base resistances of your lane opponent. So that's what I'm basically trying to say. So she's not completely in the gutter, but definitely attacking her true damage on the nerf would hurt her a lot, and she is still in the S tier, just not in the S plus, bottom of the S tier. Fiora, briefly talking about Fiora, she did get the buff, the 10 damage buff on her lunge, but I don't think that's too significant. I think the range nerf was pretty good, and I think Fiora barely hanging on to the S tier. I think if you're good, you can still make her work, but if not, she's probably just an A plus tier champion. Now, next up, we have Malphite. So Malphite, I think is A plus, potentially could move into S, especially with the Frozen Gauntlet buff, because he has decent poke when you build him like full tank. So with the Frozen Gauntlet and building a lot of armor into a heavy AD team, could make Malphite really good. But then again, we have the problem of the Divine Thunderer, against the tank meta. But I think that Malphite into certain team comps could be like a S plus tier pick if you're into an armor team who doesn't build Divine Thunder. For example, if you're against an enemy Irelia in the top lane and the rest of the team is like AD, maybe 1 AP, Malphite can be really, really good. And same goes for Mundo. If Mundo has a good lane matchup, for example, Mundo against Pantheon, something like that, where Pantheon can never kill you, and where your team really needs a tank, Mundo can be really, really tanky. Of course, as long as there isn't like Vayne or any like, you know, really good tank strat on an enemy team, Mundo can really be very tanky. And I have fought a couple of Mundos where he's impossible to kill because my team doesn't have Grievous Wounds, they don't have anyone that can shred tanks, that kind of deal. So Mundo can be a challenge to deal with in certain scenarios. And next I'm going to highlight Olaf. So Olaf, of course, did get a nerf on his Q, but that's not the main reason why I put him in A+. The main reason why I put him there is because his matchups in Baron Lane aren't very good. Now, he's a very straightforward champion in concept. He just runs at you, smacks you, and hits you with his E non-stop. So basically, it's going to be nearly impossible to get kills in the Baron Lane. Similar to Irelia, it's going to be really impossible to get kills in the Baron Lane. Just in 1v1 unless your opponent makes some stupid mistakes. But unlike Irelia, I feel that it's a lot harder to get teamfight kills on Olaf because Irelia is a really good teamfight champion, but Olaf prefers like 1v1s and 2v2s. So in 1v1s, it's really hard to kill people in the top lane, and unless you go for skull fights or something like that, it's really hard to get snowballing on Olaf compared to Irelia in the Baron lane at least. So now the rest of the tier list basically remains the same for the Baron lane. Now I want to briefly highlight Kennen, which we'll also see in the mid lane. Kennen is really, really not in a good spot at the moment. Firstly, because his damage isn't too high to begin with, but secondly, there's an exhaust meta where if you pick Kennen, you go in with your ultimate, you're going to get exhausted immediately, and you're really not going to get any work done. So Kennen is just really in a bad spot in general in the game. So now without further ado, we can move on to the jungle. Okay, so for the jungle, it remains relatively the same. Lee Sin, Kha'Zix, Olaf, and Nunu still up there. So Olaf got the nerf on the Q, but really the main thing that made him strong is firstly his ult, secondly his true damage on his E, and thirdly his attack speed and healing on his passive and his W. So Q really is kind of the least important tool in your kit in a way, although the slows are really helpful in catching up. But with Ghost or with Righteous Glory, you can still do that anyway. So really, Q is the least important part. So next time I'm going to highlight Echo and Nunu. So Echo got buffed in so many ways. Of course, his jungle could have got way better, so that's one thing, because his Q does more damage to jungle monsters. Now, he does more damage overall on his W and his E with those buffs, and I think they really overbuffed him. I think he's really, really strong as a champion right now, so especially in the jungle where he can easily go to different lanes and assassinate people, I think he's really, really strong. And even though Nunu is a tank, similar case with Nunu. Like, if you're a really good Nunu player, Nunu is going to be S+ tier. Like, what I'm trying to say by that is, if you gank non-stop with your snowball, like you gank one time, maybe you force a flash, maybe you force a flash, you force summoners, or maybe you even just get the kill on the first gank. But if you force flash, you can just repeat gank, and the kills are really easy to get with Nunu if your teammates follow up. If they don't follow up, it's a little bit more of an issue, but really, Nunu Snowball is so big and it's so indicative that, hey, I'm going in. Most teammates are gonna follow up unless they're like, of course, 1 HP or something. So Nunu, I think, is really strong for that reason. His ganks are absolutely insane. Next up, Irelia did get nerfed in the jungle. Her passive only does half damage to jungle monsters, but I think she's still really strong because, as I said, she's really strong as a champion. Her clear now is, of course, affected. However, similar to the Baron lane Irelia, she still is going to be in those Herald and Dragon teamfights, especially because she is the jungler. She can easily gank lanes and have like a 2v1 or like 3v2 kind of scenario where she would be at an advantage and get kills and start snowballing and eventually become unstoppable. So that is why. Now, Graves did get nerfed, but similar to Morgana, he still has an amazing jungle clear, a really good power farmer. When you get to 2-3 items, you're going to be carrying your team in the later stages of the game, so he's still really good. Morgana's still really good as well. Now, Wukong I've actually moved up. Now, the previous reason why I moved him down is because I thought his clear was really bad. Now, I wasn't wrong. I played Wukong and tested him out in the game. His clear is really bad, but really after you get past like your your first clear, it is kind of an acceptable, like, his first clear speed is horrible, don't get me wrong, but after his clear speed is sort of acceptable, definitely the worst clear speed out of everybody in the S plus and the S tier, but really I think his huge Teamfight Ultimate makes up for that, and the fact that he goes, like, for those kind of Black Cleaver, Divine Thunder builds that shreds people's armor, and also melts tanks, I think, like, with, like, other items, like the Death's Dance, like the Serelda's Grudge, I still think he's a really, really strong teamfight champion, so I still think he's amazing in the jungle role. So now Camille still remains in the A+ for jungle, because the true damage, while of course does affect the damage you do to jungle monsters, at the end of the day I still think her clear is not the best, but is still fine, acceptable. If you're a good Camille, you probably can still make her work. And the other one I want to point out is Evelynn. So Evelynn, as we know, after the control ward was added to the game, Evelynn is very easily spotted by teams. But the real reason why I think Evelynn is still A+ is firstly, sometimes, especially at low elo, you can still get away with sneaking around, but mostly that's not the case. The real reason why I think Evelynn is still viable is because Evelynn basically forces everybody to take control wards. In case you guys didn't realize, control wards, you can only put one and they're visible and they can be destroyed, whereas normal trinket wards you can put two which are invisible, and you generally will have more vision. Like, you literally have double the vision with normal wards because you have two wards instead of one. So especially with Evelynn, a lot of times you are forced to put control wards in, like the river bush, to spot her incoming, which the enemy team can easily clear out. So because of that, you kind of force the enemy team into taking a lot of control wards, and that reduces their vision overall, because you have less wards overall, if you get what I'm saying. Although they are permanent, but most of the time they get destroyed, at least half of them. So I still think Evelynn is pretty good in that respect. And also, if she happens to sneak up, she can still get kills, snowball the game, and take over. So it's sort of like that. Now the rest of the jungle tier list, not too much changes, so we're going to move on to talking about the mid lane. Alright, so mid lane, something really surprising. There not only isn't a D tier, but there isn't even a C tier, because I don't really think any champion is that bad anymore. Of course, coming off of that, we're going to first talk about Kayle, who's at the very bottom of the B tier. Now, Kayle moved up from the C tier to the B tier, just only at really one position, but I think moving a tier really makes a difference. Now, of course, as I said, in mid lane, Kayle is the safest. It's her best role. I don't think Baron lane Kayle is that good at all, because she's too easily ganked and destroyed. But with mid lane, at least she's close to her tower. Now, the main reason I think Kayle is not that bad anymore is because of the lethal tempo. Now, I have Kayle, for some reason, like after the patch 3.2, Kayle and Evelynn I've been seeing so much. Even though the control as Evelynn is still so popular, Kayle has become really, really popular because of the lethal tempo, and I really think Kayle mid of lethal tempo isn't that bad anymore, because with the lethal tempo she attacks at insane speeds, and when you reach like 3 items level 15, you can start like destroying people. But the problem still remains that before that, you're basically not even a champion, so your team is playing 4v5 for the first 15 minutes of the game, and sometimes the game is already won or lost at that point in time. So I find it really difficult to put her any higher, because she literally can lose her team the game by basically being half a champion before like level 15 and 3 items. So I can't put her really any higher. So now we can start talking from the top down of the tier list. So the top of this tier list basically remains the same. There isn't really any changes. Karma, just to highlight a little bit, I think has to build support even when she plays mid, because I think Karma as just an AP carry or like an AP champion in the mid lane, I don't really think is very good. I think she still does insane damage despite having support capabilities. So I think building support on mid lane Karma makes way more sense than building AP. I think AP Karma would be S tier at best, which I know most people who play Karma mid are gonna build AP, but I really think building support makes way more sense. Although we all know no one's really gonna do that. So next up we have Echo. Now, why is Echo not in the S plus tier on the mid lane? Now, the main reason why I think that's the case is because it's really difficult for Echo to kill anybody in the mid lane. I think his matchups are horrible in the mid lane. Like you take a look at it, like you see Irelia, like Yasuo, Diana, Galio, Zed. Like he isn't gonna be killing any of these people like extremely easily. Like even Ziggs is gonna be staying back. Karma's gonna be staying back. Like you're not gonna be killing any of these champions really easily unless they do something really stupid. But of course, being in the mid lane, you can roam around and get kills, and you can snowball off of that. But I think he's not bad in the mid lane, but I think he is just better in the jungle. I might move him up to the bottom of S plus in the next patch. I'm not too sure, but he's definitely on the cusp, kind of on the cusp of being there. Now the rest of the mid lane tier list, basically is relatively the same, with one exception, which is Aurelion Sol. Now, why have I moved Aurelion Sol from like the C or D tier? I think it was a C tier. I don't think I ever thought he was a trash pick, all the way up to the A tier. Now, because as I mentioned at the start of the video, like through the text, I'm assuming you play the champion optimally, and there are a ton of good Aurelion Sol players out there, and I have ran into them recently. Now, really, if Aurelion Sol is good, you pick him into certain matchups that don't have a lot of wave clear. You don't pick him against like a Ziggs or something like that. But if you can pick him into like someone who doesn't have the best time clearing the wave, like especially melee champions like Irelia, Diana, and Yasuo, like they have kill threat on you, but they cannot simply just walk up to clear the wave, like ignoring you as if you aren't there, because your stars are still gonna chip them for a decent amount of damage, and even like Echo, who's melee, so you still can shove the wave and you still can roam. Like your roams with your Q, like that huge star thing, is gonna be deadly, because it's similar to Nunu, where you roam, you force a flash, and then you can roam again and pretty much guarantee a kill. And you can snowball your team off of that, you can snowball yourself off of that. Mostly it's a more facilitative champion where you snowball your team off of that, and I've been on the receiving end of that Aurelion Sol roam way too many times for me to really think he's that bad of a champion anymore. So I'm going to put him in the A tier, which is like average, because not too many people know how to play Aurelion Sol, but those that know how to play Aurelion Sol and play him in a suitable matchup, I think he can be really, really good. So anyways, that's pretty much the mid lane done and dusted. Now we can move on to talking about ADCs. Alright, so ADC is normally my favorite to talk about, but the reality of the situation is there really isn't anything to talk about, because every single ADC basically remained in the same position. It's the only role I didn't change anything up, because my views haven't really changed on anything. I still think Vayne is the best, hardest carry ADC you can get. Kai'Sa is up next, and then Jinx. I still think Jinx is S+ no matter what anyone else says. Caitlyn and Xayah, really good Stormrazor abusers, really good champions. If we're good at Draven, Draven will always be S. Of course, we're assuming that people are playing champions optimally. Varus is still an amazing champion, but he's not a Lethal Tempo or Stormrazor abuser, so simply because he doesn't fit the meta, he's going to be A+, but he's still really great as a champion. Similar to Lucian, Lucian cannot abuse either of these either, but he's still a really strong champion. He's still in the A+ tier. Tristana, Ezreal, and Jhin. Now, Tristana and Jhin, really good Stormrazor users. However, just not as good as the other Stormrazor users above them. Ezreal cannot take advantage of Lethal Tempo, Kraken Slayer, or Stormrazor, but he's still a safe champion. He's still really viable and still really good if you play him properly or into or with certain team comps, so he's still A+. Now, so I really think that the ADC meta is the best in terms of all the roles, because really, I wouldn't really complain if I see any ADC from the S+ to the A+ tier. Even to a certain extent, if I see an Ashe, I may not even be that upset. Or Misfortune, I wouldn't even be that upset. Like, there isn't really any pick here that I think is egregiously bad. I just think every pick is just alright. I think the worst picks are, of course, Ashe and Misfortune, but even Ashe and Misfortune do have places in the game. Like Ashe, with her utility, Misfortune with her team fight. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I think every ADC is really viable in the current meta at the moment. Of course, there are tiers for a reason, so the S+ ADCs are definitely going to be better than the A ADCs, but what I'm saying is that the gap between S+ and S to A+, and A to A+ to A, and overall, of course, A to S+ is really small compared to all the other roles. So yeah, that's pretty much it for ADCs. Now we can talk about supports. Alright, so on supports, really nothing too much has changed, either really minor changes. Now, first up, S tier still the same, all the enchanters. Now, some people might wonder why I put Yuumi at S+, even though it's solo queue and you're not like doing with someone. The reason is I think Yuumi is just so OP that as long as there's one out of the other 4 people on your team doing well, you can attach to that person and make that person unstoppable. That's why I think Yuumi is still insane in solo queue. I think that all the enchanters are really good at the moment, especially with Lethal Tempo or Stormrazor ADCs being really good. Enchanters are really good to buff them up, and even if not the ADCs, there's still a lot of other people you can buff up, like Olaf in the jungle, for example. Now, S tier, I actually moved Thresh down 2 positions, because I think that if you want an engaged support, I think having a Rakan or Alistar that can get multi-man, like 5-man engages, is better than a Thresh who can only catch really like one person kind of with his hook, and even if he goes like in, he doesn't really catch a whole team with his box or like with his flay, something like that. I think having like a Rakan or Alistar is probably going to be more useful than a Thresh, but of course a Thresh is still a really, really good champion. I think always will be a really good champion if you're good at Thresh. And Janna's really good for disengaging, all those Lee Sins, those Alistars, and those Rakans. So she's really kind of a counter champion to engage champions, which is why she's really there. Another person I want to highlight is, let's take a look here. Nothing too much, but really I kind of moved down Annie, Malphite, and Pantheon all the way down. Now the main reason for that is I really think they're trash tier. I'm not sure why I put them in C tier at the beginning, but Malphite and Annie are basically reliant on only their ult. Like, Annie's not going to get in range to really poke anybody, so she's really only a level 5 ult kind of champion. And Malphite is a little bit better than Annie. I think I need to swap their positions on the next tier list, but Malphite is a little bit better than Annie. He is able to poke with Q, and he is able to engage. But if you want to play like an engage support, like with a Malphite, why not just play Alistar, or why not just play Rakan? They're so much better as supports. And Pantheon, same deal. He can engage. He's very predictable. He's melee. He has no range. He can only engage onto a single target with his W, and he has to build damage. He can't really build like supportive or tanky. So really, why not just play Rakan or Alistar or other engage supports like Leona instead? Like, basically, the D tier champions are worse versions of like champions who are above them, who can do a better job. So that is pretty much it for the patch 3.28 tier list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, although there's not too many changes, but I tried to go a little bit more in depth into some particular picks that people might have more questions on, or like that I felt needed a little bit more explanation and justification. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and goodbye.